away from Washington. Now we move on to our next news. EU's top negotiator, Maros Sefcovic, defended the recent EU-US trade agreement, describing it as the best possible outcome under difficult circumstances. The deal, which was struck by EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen and US President Donald Trump, prevents a trade war by imposing a 15% tariff on EU exports to the US, while US exports to Europe will remain tariff-free. Sefcovic emphasized that the agreement was a preferable alternative to a trade war, which could result in tariffs as high as 30%, halting transatlantic trade. Despite some criticism, including from French Prime Minister Francois Bayrou, who called it a dark day. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez voiced cautious support for the deal, saying he backed it without any enthusiasm. Spain, while less exposed to the US market, expressed concerns about sectors like olive oil and wine, which are more vulnerable to the higher tariffs. Let's listen into what Spanish Prime Minister had to say.
Valoro el esfuerzo que ha hecho la Comisión Europea. Valoro la actitud constructiva y negociadora que ha tenido la presidenta de la Comisión Europea y, en todo caso, respaldo este acuerdo comercial, pero lo hago sin ningún entusiasmo.
The EU hopes the agreement will avert further escalation while keeping trade relations with the US intact. Now we are joined by Peter Cordillo. He's a chief market economist at Spartan Capital Securities. Joins us live from Rome, Italy. Thank you, Peter, for joining us today. And we had many discussions on this, and you called it right. You said that there will be a trade deal, and now there is a trade deal. So how significant is this, that 15% tariff is the trade deal here?
Well, you know, it's significant, but certainly it's not the greatest deal that the EU could have asked for, and I suspect that it's not the greatest deal that the United States wanted. But of course, they did come to some sort of a compromise, and of course, 15% tariffs is a steep level. And as I said before on your shows, that eventually that's going to show up in the inflationary indices, and so we could be looking at higher inflation over the next 6 to 7 months. But I think the real sticky point here is that the United States is more and more turning to protectionism, and that's not good, because that means that the global economy can slow down. That means that our economy can slow down. So the combination of higher inflation from the tariffs and slowing economic growth usually results in a bad case of stagflation, and the markets usually don't like that. So I think, you know, if you look at some of the reactions, I mean, President Trump said that this was the biggest deal ever. Obviously, if you heard the representative of the EU, the president of the EU, she says that this was a good deal under the circumstances. But if you notice, France is not happy with it, and neither is Spain. Spain and France, of course, have backed it because they have no choice, but they're not really enthused about this deal. And if you look at the reaction of the global markets, I would kind of think that we're not seeing, a vivacious run-up in stocks. And in Europe, they reversed course and actually went down. In Asia, they were mixed. Here in the States, they're doing a little bit better than Friday, but certainly nothing that would suggest that we have a market that's in orbit at this time.
Yes. Thank you very much, Peter Cordillo, for joining us and sharing your insight as a chief market economist at Spartan Capital Securities. Joined us live from Rome, Italy. Well, that's all we have time for. We will